Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack the really profound human and cultural costs of the late 16th century Japanese invasions of the Korean peninsula. And we're going to do it by looking through the lens of one specific commander's incredibly desperate choices. Picture this. It's a bitterly windy day. You're inside a terribly claustrophobic war tent. Outside, troops are just frantically preparing to deploy, but inside, the Japanese commander, Shimazu Yoshihiro, is just sitting there quiet. There's no excitement of a glorious victory on his face, just this deep anxiety and cold calculation. He looks at his generals and issues a chilling directive: bring back everything you can get. Now, this wasn't your standard military order that just go conquer some territory. No, this was something much darker. It was a mandate for absolute extraction. So let's look at why he felt totally forced to give such a ruthless command. The absolute crucial point to understand here is Yoshihiro's precarious political situation back home. His motivations, they weren't just about military glory or expanding borders. See, his forces had already faced a humiliating defeat in Yushu, and that severely weakened his standing right in front of the ruler, the Kanpaku. He basically tells his men, look, this upcoming campaign isn't just a battle. There is literally only one path left for us: survive and prove your worth. He knew that to stop his political freefall, he needed to bring back tangible, undeniable proof of their value. For Yoshihiro, this war had suddenly morphed into a desperate political lifeline. And that sets the stage for their descent into the grueling, completely brutal reality of the conflict that was waiting for them. As they sailed toward Joseon, nobody knew who was actually going to make it back. They were plunging headfirst into the Imjin and Jeongyu Wars. We're talking endless, exhausting combat. They faced these brutal clashes at places like Jeonju Castle, but honestly, more importantly, they ran into incredibly fierce, totally unpredictable resistance from unnamed righteous armies. Imagine the sheer chaos of it. You have a highly structured military running straight into desperate civilians who are fiercely defending their homes. Swords clashing, arrows raining down like a storm day in and day out. In that terrifying environment, mere survival wasn't just a goal, it was basically a daily miracle. To really wrap your head around the scale of what happened next, just picture this number: 7,000. That was the initial sheer force of Yoshihiro's troops standing outside his tent before they deployed. 7,000 men, all ready to fight, carrying the massive weight of their commander's desperate need to prove himself. It's a huge number, right? It represents immense military might and human potential. But as we all know, war is a devastating equalizer. Because as this long war dragged on, that initial force of 7,000 plummeted. 6,000, 5,000, just steadily downwards. By the time the campaign neared its end, less than half of Yoshihiro's men were still standing. Less than half. This staggering drop represents the brutal, relentless attrition that completely decimated his forces. Yoshihiro looked out over the battlefield and realized that in this war, a simple, clean victory was just utterly impossible. And honestly, it was this massive loss of life that fueled a desperate, terrifying shift in his strategy. As his army shrank, his commands became increasingly ruthless. That earlier order of general extraction shifted into a terrifying new mandate: bring back more. Think about it. When you're losing men by the thousands, you have to justify that catastrophic loss with something tangible to the rulers back home. So the campaign officially morphed from a military conquest into a mission of absolute calculated plunder. If they couldn't bring back a completely conquered nation, well, they were going to bring back its wealth, its beauty, and its very essence. Joseon villages were burned to the ground and systematic looting began in earnest. Okay, so let's break down what bring back more actually meant in practice. The spoils of war obviously included gold and silver, which is pretty typical. But they also went out of their way to target highly prized ceramics, invaluable books, and, most tragically, human beings, the skilled potters of Joseon. These weren't just random items grabbed in the chaos of a battle. Actually, scratch that, it was the exact opposite. These were meticulously selected artifacts and kidnapped people, specifically intended to serve as undeniable proof of power back in Japan. Really think about what that means for a second. Systematically stealing an entire industry's top talent and cultural heritage just to cover up a military failure. And the kidnapping of these potters was uniquely devastating. The theft of the hands that touched the clay wasn't just taking prisoners of war. It was the calculated theft of technology, of power, and of an entire nation's future. We usually think of prisoners of war as enemy soldiers, right? But capturing artisans, that literally removes centuries of unmatched ceramic techniques from a culture. Yoshihiro honestly believed that with these specific people, his clan could rise to the top again. He was stealing the absolute foundation of Joseon's cultural industry to build his own. But even in the midst of all this ruthless calculation, you get these moments of profound human doubt. Picture this scene. It's late at night. The war camp is dead quiet. Yoshihiro is sitting there all alone, holding this delicate, stolen Joseon ceramic in his hands. It's intricate, it's deeply beautiful, and as he looks at this incredibly fragile object that he took by violent force, he has to ask himself, is this what we wanted? It's such a powerful moment of reflection. He's literally holding the physical manifestation of beauty obtained through absolute brutality, and the sheer contradiction of it is finally hitting him. And that late-night reflection leads directly to a really tragic realization. We came looking for a dream, but returned with death, plunder, and silence. That phrase just perfectly summarizes the emptiness of his campaign. They sailed across the sea seeking glory, wealth, a way to secure their future, basically a dream of immense power. But the reality of what they actually achieved was just a hollow, haunting victory. They completely destroyed the very beauty they were so desperate to capture. Sure, they brought back stunning objects of art, but they left behind a landscape of absolute devastation. So what happens after the war? Well, it's a tale of two starkly different realities. In Japan, history records incredible progress. Over in places like the Satsuma domain, those kidnapped Joseon potters were forced to build new kilns. Because of that, Joseon's advanced ceramic technology experienced this massive revival and flourished beautifully on Japanese soil. People hailed this as a huge cultural triumph. But we have to remember, this so-called progress was built entirely on stolen lives. It was built on displaced potters who would look across the sea and literally never see their homes again. Their brilliant art lived on, sure, but their personal freedom was entirely erased. Fast forward a bit. The war is technically over, but honestly, it never really ends for the people who orchestrated it. Yoshihiro is now an aging commander. He's back home, his political position is presumably totally secure, but he is fundamentally haunted. His memories are just filled with burning villages, the cries of displaced families, and the faces of the people he kidnapped. He's left there wrestling with his own conscience, completely unable to confidently answer whether all that horrific devastation was actually justified just by his need to survive. The psychological cost of his ruthless calculation finally came due. Which brings us to this incredibly poignant symbol of the entire historical tragedy. Take a look at this breathtaking painting. It's the Mongyu Dowondo Sanhwan, which translates to Dream Journey to the Peach Blossom Land. It represents this ethereal, peaceful, utopian dream. Think of this painting as a metaphor. It stands in such stark, heartbreaking contrast to the gritty, blood-soaked reality of the war we've been talking about. You see, the war didn't just break bodies and burn towns. It completely shattered the utopian dreams of peace and cultural harmony that masterpieces like this represented. That dream just vanished into the smoke of conflict. When we really sit back and reflect on the aftermath, we are left with a highly melancholic reality. War permanently shatters a beautiful world. When the dust finally settled, what was actually left? Just the silence of the surviving, the traces of the vanished, and a sea that knows everything but speaks nothing. The Japanese forces returned across that sea with their stolen treasures. The Joseon people were left with burned villages and missing families, and the ocean between them just silently absorbed the entirety of the tragedy. History loves to call the resulting centuries of Japanese ceramics cultural advancement. But when we look at the true legacy of this conflict, I want to leave you with this question. Can progress ever truly erase the traces of a vanished dream? Can the beauty of stolen technology and displaced talent ever really make up for the heavy human cost paid to acquire it? It's something that absolutely still resonates today when we talk about the true origins of our cultural artifacts. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the history behind the beauty, and I'll catch you next time.